Hello, and welcome to Interviews from the Golden Beat 2. In this installment, we are talking to Dan McCarthy about his song submission entitled The Basement. Dan McCarthy, you're a vibraphone player, are you not?
I am.
Can you tell us a little bit about your history with the instrument and the music industry and yourself in general?
Yeah, sure. So, the high-level view, I started music when I was 3 years old. My parents put me in the Humber College Community Music School at the North Campus, which at the time was about a 5-10 minute drive from where I was living in Rexdale. And I loved it and did that for many years. I ended up going to a Etobicoke School of the Arts for high school as a percussion major. I went in on drums. In my final year, which I at the time there were OACs, but I did not do my OACs. I graduated after grade 12. So in my grade 12 year, I was late to percussion ensemble the day they were handing out the parts for the year. And all of the good and fun instruments were taken, and the only one left was the stupid vibraphone that you have to learn notes to play. And I was pretty pissed. Everyone, everyone wants the coveted drum set. Definitely didn't get that. John Fedorsen got that. John Fedorsen. And then, congas, bongos, timbales. I mean, even the shaker egg, like people just didn't want to play an instrument that had melody to it because then you got to learn notes and chords and
That's right.
all that.
Like the coveted triangle as well,
I mean,
right?
the triangle. I mean,
Whew.
although quick aside about that, man, when I went to Humber College for college a couple years or the next year, and I was a percussion major there, the head of percussion, Roger Flock, he actually showed us some videos of like the heaviest triangle players you have ever seen, like what they can do with like dampening and muting and like some of the like it's just you would never know it was a triangle. And so from then on, anytime everyone was like, "Oh, you play the triangle," I'm like, "You know how fucking hard the triangle is? It's hard." So yeah, so that was high school. I ended up loving the vibraphone. It turned into something that I spent a lot of time doing. I spent a lot more time practicing that year than I thought I was going to do. Etobicoke School of the Arts let me borrow the vibraphone that summer, which was pretty cool considering I wasn't going back the next year. wonder if I told them that. I don't know. Well, either way.
Did they get it back?
Yeah, they did. Because I actually got a vibraphone. I with the help of my grandmother, I was able to purchase an instrument from Long and McQuaid, which was a beautiful vibraphone and got me through 20 years. I don't play that one anymore. I just gave it away, but we'll get to that later. And yeah, so I got to Humber and loved it. I was a dual vibraphone drum major, but very quickly realized that not only did my passion lie with vibraphone, but that was also where my skill lied, and also there just weren't any other vibraphone players. So it was a sort of niche that I could fill. And so I did that. Humber 3 years, 3 years. Graduated with my diploma. Hung out in Toronto for another year or two after that, and then on a complete whim, decided, hey, you know what would be a good idea? Going to New York with no money and no visa and no idea what to do. But that turned into a 15-year stay, and moved back in 2019 with my family.
That's amazing. Just like that, eh? You're just like, you know what? I'm out of here. New York, here I come.
Man, it was a trip because it was something that I always wanted to do in those like kind of like dream long shot things that you always want to do. Kind of like I'd love to spend 3 months traveling the Highlands and Scotland and just like, taste through every single scotch and just like live there for 2 months. Like that would be an amazing dream. The New York thing when I was like 2021 was the same thing. Like it was like, oh, one day I'll move to New York. And so a friend of mine, this guy Gordon Webster, was a piano player, one of the most incredible piano players you're ever going to meet. We'd been playing a lot the summer of 2004, and he was telling me how he was going to go down to Manhattan School of Music for his master's that fall, and he's like, I have an apartment in Washington Heights, but I just found out that my roommate bailed on me, and I've already signed the lease. So just if you do any gigs with anybody that's moving down for school, just let them know. I need a roommate pretty soon. This was like probably beginning of July.
So this was lucky for you.
This was well, and I didn't even I was like, cool, I'll pass it along. Like I still didn't think that it would like I didn't immediately go to me. Like I wasn't like, oh yeah,
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
I was just sort of like, yeah, for sure, I'll pass it along. Um, and then like I think that night or the next day, I was talking to my girlfriend at the time, and I was like, hey, like just so you know, because she was a singer, she knew some people too. I was like, hey, just so you know, blah blah blah. Um, and she's like, well, don't you want to go to New York? I was like, well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, he's moving in like a month. Like, I mean, I don't have a job or any money or any prospects or any friends or like, I don't have it. There's no way that's going to happen. Um, but over the next few days, I just sort of, I was like, you know what? Like, fuck it.
Just
I'm
do
gonna
it.
do it. And so I called him up. The apartment was in like 152nd and Broadway. It was, I think my rent was like 480 or 520 a month or something like that. And so I got a loan out and I told him I was like, hey man, I'm gonna do this. You know, if I don't make it, like I'll move back to Toronto, get a job again, and I'll just send you money for rent until you find a roommate. So there's no risk for you. He was like, awesome, cool. And so a month later, I hopped on a train with a one-way ticket to New York and no idea what I was gonna do.
Did you bring the vibraphone with you when you went?
He did. So he was driving a big truck down because he was moving and he had paperwork and stuff. So when he crossed the border, so he just drove to my parents' house and just put everything that I wanted to take in the truck and just said it was all his.
Okay. Wow.
So it worked out pretty well for me that way. So all I had to do was like I think on the train, I think I had a backpack. And it was such a trip because like I got out of the, it's like a 12-hour train ride. You get on the train at 8 in the morning, you land at Penn Station or whatever at 8 o'clock at night. And I just remember like coming up out of the train station and being like, basically Times Square. I'm just sort of like, holy shit, I live here. Like, I don't know anything about this. Like, I think I'd been once before for like 3 days or something. Like, I didn't know anything about the city. I didn't know I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, in hindsight, I mean, that was one of a couple sort of turning points in my life. And that moving to New York changed everything.
Wow. That's amazing. And being in New York, things changing for you. Uh, you obviously would have met people in the music scene. Were you able to fruitfully move along your vibraphone career because of this move?
Yes and no. I ended up getting really lucky and I got a job at a little jazz club slash restaurant in the West Village called the Cornelia Street Cafe. Like I walked in and the first question they asked me was, or the first thing they told me was like, hey, just so you know, like we don't hire bartenders and servers, we hire artists. Like we find they're much more interesting people. We find they're harder workers. We don't want lifetime like wait staff in this place. We want people that are going to be here for a couple of years and they're going to move on. And I was like, oh, I found my people. This is amazing. um, and so I got the job and eventually started bartending in the jazz club, probably about a year and a half, 2 years later. And that's when I really got to like working downstairs and like running sound for all these people and like and taking being the door person and like being the head bartender down there for all these shows and stuff was I got to meet a ton of like some of like my idols and people that I've been listening to for a decade. So that was a trip. I got to play with a lot of them because of that. So I mean, in some ways, yeah, like my career moved along because I got this sort of special opportunity to kind of meet and know some of these people. Um, if versus just being a fan or someone that goes to their shows or whatever, like them coming down and getting to know me and like kind of becoming pals that way. Um, that was that was such an amazing opportunity for me to kind of meet these people and see how that worked. It was a double-edged sword though because I also saw that like these people that I was idolizing were coming in and playing like a Friday night for like an $80 door gig with like a half full room and I'm like wow, this is like one of the best saxophone players the world has ever seen
Hmm.
and they're hardly filling a room on a Friday night and they're making $80 and then me as the bartender I'm walking away with 250. Like this is kind of an eye-opening experience for me.
That's the quandary with jazz. It seems, isn't it? Like I think I've seen a meme once that said, the definition of a rock player is he plays three chords for 1,000 people, and a jazz player plays 1,000 chords for a room full of three people.
I mean, shit, like that's not wrong. And like not to like put myself in hot water already because I feel like we just started talking, but like that's my qualm with like I have beef with all these jazz musicians that like it's like people try to make the music so complicated and it's almost like if it's simple, like they're selling out or whatever. It's like it almost has to be so complicated that no one gets it, because if people want to listen to their music, it's like, well, it must be too simple. Well, it's like, well, what's your ultimate goal here then? Are you trying to make music that's so like obtuse that no one even understands it, and then no one listens to it, and that's when you finally like satisfied yourself? Like, I don't understand this whole like idea of selling out. Like, man, if you're playing music that you like, cool. Like, there's no such thing as selling out. Like, do whatever you want to do. But jazz, yeah, we make up like 0.1% of the jazz, like of the sales, and it's just such a weird market.
So that's a real stigma. That's an actual real stigma in that industry, in that genre.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say everybody, but like, it's amazing to me how many people think that the music has to be so complex. Like, people, so many jazz musicians that I know think that their music is better simply because it's more complicated or takes longer to learn or whatever.
Mm.
What I don't like are the people that create this like incredibly intricate, music, and then they don't make any money at it, and they complain that no one wants to listen to it. And that like people's tastes are just like no one's willing to like give it a shot, or people have these like too simple tastes because of Taylor Swift, and her songs are just so simple, and it's just like dumbing down America, and it's dumbing down like the listener. And I'm just like,
I also happen to know that you love Taylor Swift. So
I mean, how could you not love Taylor Swift? I mean, she's America's sweetheart. Come on. But yeah, and I've had this conversation with a lot of jazz musicians. I mean, I don't think it's just like a. I also don't think I'm alone in this. Like, I'm not. I'm certainly not. The first person to say this. But I think that people need to chill, and people just need to like, jazz has become this thing where like they're trying to make it like it used to be in the 60s and 70s. And it's like jazz was what it was in the 60s and 70s because it was a new thing and it was rebelling against previous things. So trying to do what they were doing, playing the same songs they were playing in the same ways they were playing it, is actually not doing jazz a service. It's actually doing it a disservice, because that's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to evolve. Like, that was the whole point of like, the mild to the cool jazz stuff, like the fusion stuff. I mean, even like the blue note stuff, like late 50s, early 60s, all the stuff that was happening was a response to something that was going on in the world.
sure, I think
So,
it's. I just want to say, I think it also has to do with a lot with the culture of the time too, right?
mhm,
Because like you said, back in the '60s, like that was, like you said it, that was a group of people. It was an ideology that was biting back against something, right? So it sounds to me like a lot of these people, they're not even thinking about what's happening around them, and they're just taking, things are cyclical, right? And the rings of time, like they always intersect. It's like a crazy Venn diagram, and they're just taking that one circle, and yeah, like you said, they're just kind of warping it.
yeah,
And maybe a lot of these people, maybe they need to just look outside a little bit more and be connected to the world around them, and not necessarily, and not necessarily social media and that kind of stuff. That could be
right.
like a real misnomer for a lot of people too, I can imagine, right? So Dan, do you remember what the first? Do you remember the first song that you ever recorded was? Do you remember what that song was?
Um, I don't know what it would have been.
Okay, so then what would have been the first recording that you made that was like very meaningful to you?
I know what it is. So that would have been the summer before I started at Humber College, and I was in a jazz group with Chris Hunsberger, who was a saxophone player friend of mine from ESA. Um, we were, what were we called? The Jazz Conception. That was our band name. It was me, him. Uh, I played drums mostly, but I played vibes on a couple tunes. We did a little demo. Was it Richard Carnegie played bass and Martin Skripchik played guitar? Man, I'll be impressed if I got that right, but I think I did. Maybe Richard didn't play bass. Oh, I think he did. Anyway, whatever. And we went to my friend Mark Kosher, who's an incredible audio engineer. We went to his. He had a little recording studio in his basement, and we went there and we recorded. I don't know, 5, 6 tunes. Um, I mean, I was just fresh out of high school. I remember my mom drove me and picked me up from like it was like that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's definitely a trip to hear yourself back for like the first time.
Hmm.
I don't even know if I have that recording still. I'm sure it's around somewhere.
I think you need to find it.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I wonder if Mark still has it. I'll have to ask him. I probably have a copy somewhere, But yeah, I think I did one song on Vibes. We recorded one of the tunes that one of the albums that had just come out at that time was the John Scofield album with Medeski Martin and Wood,
Oh yeah.
A Go Go, which is still such a heavy album. We recorded
Sorry,
Hot
it
and
was
Tot.
it was it, sorry, it was John Scofield a Go Go, right? That was the name of that album. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good album. Um, yeah, even just that first track. He's just such a ooh, get the chills just thinking about it. But anyway, we recorded Hot and Tot off that album. We recorded a couple of tunes, and then I recorded one Vibes tune. I think I was The Way You Look Tonight. I played Vibes on that one. So that would have been my first like vibraphone recording.
Oh, okay. So the Schofield one, you were playing drums?
Drums, yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. Very cool. Right on. So so if that's your first recording, moving forward in time to the present day, why did you choose to do a Golden Beat song?
You told me I had to, or we weren't going to be friends anymore. Am I supposed to
That
say that?
okay? That is true. That is very true. I did say that. It's true. Yes.
So, I mean, I think that a couple reasons. I think, other than you just asked me to, and honestly, if you asked me to, record anything, I would record it. Um, but I think it was it was a fun challenge because it's not often that you record that way. It's not often that you have a finished part with nothing built around it that you then kind of create things. It was also kind of beginning of pandemic times, and I was trying to like find ways to be creative without playing with people. And I was getting to know Logic a little better. I've since improved my ability to record at home a lot. Even since that, I think it's gotten a lot better. I've tweaked my mixing ability a little bit and all that stuff. But it just seemed like a really good challenge to like kind of be given this sort of rather than build the song this way, it was kind of built on one line and you had to build up from that the whole way through. It's just a different way of composing. Yeah.
I've always felt it to be, here's the box. Here's a box for you. Fill it up.
Right.
And and if you look at some of the rules, you can work outside the box. You can rearrange the box. But like I've given you that box to sort of play with, I guess, right?
Right.
You're like a little kitten. Here's a box. Just go crazy.
Go to town, little kitten. Go to town.
Go to town, little kitten. So for your song, where did you pull inspiration from to come up with the beautiful melodies that you did in your song?
The short answer, so the first thing that I did was I mapped it out, like because the drums go through certain, there is a form to what the drums are doing. And so I kind of had to map it out first. And I think the first thing that I added was the bass, just to kind of help outline the form for me. And then I added the keys, and then the vibes was the last thing to do. And one of the things that I've been experimenting with, which ended up essentially being my entire master's thesis, which got written over the course of the summer last year and into the fall. Well, right up until December, if we're being honest, was like But essentially the topic of my thesis for York, which I just did a master's in composition at York that I finished in December. It was based on Hunter Thompson's writing. So Hunter Thompson, for those unaware, is the author. Most people know him from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which is a sort of drug-addled journey, to the heart of the American dream, as sort of the subtitle of the book is. But he was a very prolific political writer from the 60s through, he wrote until, I think his last book was published in '04, which is now, 04. Anyway, but his writing sort of got not as great after the mid-'70s. But anyway, he was a great political writer, and he wrote a lot of interesting stuff, but he was a very crazy person. Um, and he's sort of credited with coming up with this style of writing called gonzo journalism, which essentially is sort of putting yourself in the middle of the story, and then essentially sort of recording it kind of word for word. There's actually a lot of articles and even in books where he he was either so drunk or so whatever that in order for him to actually finish it, he actually just sent tape recordings of himself like to the editor, and they just like transcribed it word for word, and that became part of the book or part of the article or whatever. Um, and so I started to kind of think about this in terms of music, and I mean, the first thing was like, well, it's very much like jazz, where it's like improvised. You make it up, and you don't get to take it back. Like if you're playing live, if you're recording, it's right there. Like there's no changing it afterwards, right? Um, and and so I was like, well, but how about if I were to approach this like I'm gonna try and actually create a melody, but I'm gonna improvise it. So instead of just like soloing and trying whatever, I'm gonna try and create something that's actually um, more melodic and that would function in terms of a melody. And so that's kind of how I wrote my thesis. Was I wrote a whole bunch of music inspired by him that way, and a lot of it was kind of based around that. But I kind of took that principle to the golden beat, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna kind of listen, and I'm gonna play along, but I'm only gonna play along when I feel like it's right. But then I'm not going to allow myself to go back and change things after.
Mm.
So it's going to be what it's going to be, and so I need to make sure that it's tasteful because I don't want to, kind of. I think I did eventually go back a couple times and change things, but like for the most part, um, I tried to stick to that sort of principle where I wanted it to be more spontaneous melody writing instead of like sitting there and trying to come up with the perfect melody.
So the song starts. It sounds to me like it starts with vibraphone and the beat. Is there any other instruments that kick off the track?
Yeah, it's the beat with the bass and the Rhodes.
Right.
So I like Logic has some pretty good native sounds, but I feel like their Rhodes is actually pretty decent. And so whenever I've been doing stuff from home, I've been trying to like it just sounds a little more realistic than the piano, so I tend to sort of err on the side of Rhodes. Good album name right there.
Air on the Side of Roads. That's a great. That's a great album name. So in the overall makeup of your track, can you just tell me what your instrumentation was?
Yeah, it's just a straight up quartet. So it's just vibraphone, Rhodes, bass, and drums. And I tend to, although yeah, I think I went through afterwards and maybe did a couple of different versions where I added a little more of like some textural stuff. But I think that the version that I went with was just quartet, just because that sort of acoustic style is where I feel most comfortable. It's where most of my life has been lived in terms of music, has been in an acoustic setting. I love creating other stuff too, and I have a blast doing it, but I definitely feel more at home like with that sort of acoustic band.
Okay, cool. Um, so did you edit any of the beat itself to suit the needs of your song? Did you cut out any of the beat or rearrange any of it?
No, and to be honest, I didn't even realize that we were allowed to do that. So it wasn't even I thought like my understanding of it was simply that this exists as it is. We can't change it, cut it, edit it, remix it or anything. It just has to stay the same. And then and so it wasn't until I actually saw some other people's submissions I was like, "Oh, I guess I could have changed it around a little bit."
Do
Oh,
you
that's fine.
ever read the fine print on anything when
I'm
you
sorry,
go?
what is this fine print you speak of? I'm
Uh,
sure I probably just didn't pay attention because I probably initially read it and just assumed I was going to do like an acoustic type thing anyway, and so then
sure.
I didn't even think about it, and then I probably like when I actually got into it, I should have given a little more thought to it, but I didn't. So there.
I don't think you need to. It's beautiful the way it is, man. Like I love it the way it is. So, okay, cool. So there's a melody throughout the song, like a reoccurring melodic theme. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came up with that and maybe even what it means to you, if anything?
I mean, the short answer is no. I mean, it would have been improvised on the spot, in that sort of like gonzo journalism way that I've taken to kind of writing, and I've actually been using this a lot in a lot of composition lately. But what I'm really enjoying about working through home, this is actually one of the first projects that I started doing it was, I improvised the melody with the vibraphone part, which granted then I would like copy it and paste it into parts that it would make sense. So it wasn't like just a one time through because I wanted it to have obviously continuity. But then I went through and when I recorded the Rhodes part, especially some of the unison lines and harmony lines, then I would like take my time and like listen to the line and actually play it in perfectly. And if it wasn't perfect, I'd literally like line it up like in the MIDI editor so that those notes matched the vibraphone, so it sounds like it's supposed to be like that. But nothing was ever written down. There was never like literally the melody originally with just vibraphone was just purely improvised on the spot.
So you were your own quantization machine then.
Essentially,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's kind of cool. Nice, man. So, so you've already mentioned that you wrote this like a quartet, but I swear, as the song moves on, I can hear like a little synthesizer kind of trickle in there. It's not in there? There's nothing like that in the song?
I don't think so.
I thought I could hear something in the background, and maybe that's just some overtones doing their thing.
Oh no, you're right. You're right. I did add a little bit of stuff in there. Yeah, yeah. I decided to give it a little bit of color.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a little bit of color with some sort of again, I'm not a logic expert, but I just try to like play around with it and sort of see the kinds of stuff that I can get. And like the whole alchemy library that they have is pretty extensive, and there's some pretty fun sounds in there. And so I've just been sort of playing around with how that works, and yeah, just sort of adding a splash here, splash here.
No, I think it really added to the song. It was nice. Um, so the way that you've sort of done the song, it's like you've got the song opens, and I guess you start on a verse and you sort of move to a chorus, and then when for me what I felt like was the second half of the song, you almost use that like a middle eight for a solo section. Um, how did you make that decision to divide the song in such a way?
I think it just, again, it came back to sort of like road mapping the song at first, just listening to the drum parts and sort of hearing how it, because, to me, like the drum part, it arranged the song for me because those sections were, depending on how the beat was being played or like on what cymbal or, the pattern that they're using, it clearly defines the certain sections of the song. And so I was simply trying to like fit the music around the roadmap that the drums already provided. Like they provided all the necessary direction that I needed to have for that. So anything that I put in was simply because the drums said that this this section needs to be this or whatever.
I guess I just find it interesting how everybody, like the beat has spoken to everybody in a different way.
Yeah.
And this is the way it spoke to you, and this is the way that you've worked with it. And I'm just trying to ask or get from everyone how was that spoken to you? You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to understand that a little bit more. But maybe it's something you can't really put into words. It's just something that's inherent in you that you've taken from that beat.
So I mean it, like for me, like part of the thing to understand with this stuff is that like the part of your brain, which I believe is the limbic system, which is the part responsible for emotion and feeling, it has no way to communicate. Like there's no language aspects to the limbic brain, right? So, which is why we're so bad as humans at trying to explain why we are in love with someone. Like you can say, well, they make me laugh and that, and they're really funny and they're supportive. And it's like, well, but so are 40 million other people. Like we're so bad at actually explaining the feeling of love and why we love someone because that part of the brain doesn't communicate. It's feeling. Like there's literally no translation to the other part of the brain that communicates. And so to try to explain that, like we do our best sometimes and we use metaphors a lot and we, whatever. But it's and I think this is why music is so fascinating to me because it's like, music to me is a way of communicating that sort of limbic brain stuff to people without actually using language because it's a way of using emotion and talking about things that we don't have the words to talk about. And so that's why I struggle sometimes to explain some things when it comes to like that kind of thing because I'm like, I don't think there's a way for me to explain it. I think it's just a feeling that you get or that you have when you're making music that's it's just part of the process and it's part of every musician's process. Like I'm not saying by any means that like I'm like some unique special flower that has this ability. Like every musician has this, but yeah, I don't know if that helps, but
No, I think that's everyone's always trying to rationalize how these types of communications work, I think. And and like you said, like whether it's through metaphors or through just a beautiful melody, everyone's just trying to put their feelings out there for other people to try and understand or relate to, I guess,
Right.
right? So that's good. That's interesting. Very cool. Um, one of the last few questions I have for you here, uh, moving on from the brain. Um, uh, I've
Or
been
so it
listening.
wants us to think.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Um, I've been listening to your track in my home studio, and I have a couple of nice monitors here, and I've had it cranked up a few times. And one of the things that really grabs me about your song, and especially the vibraphone, is number one, it sounds beautiful, and I want to know what you used to record it. But number two, when you have a proper set of monitors hooked up, uh, the way that you've mic'd that vibraphone, you can feel the low register on one side and
Yeah.
the high register on the other side. And it when you're going up or down the scale, it's just spreading right across, and it feels great to listen to it like that. It really does. What are you using to record your vibes?
Yeah, so I have two Audio Technica, the AT2030s, which are just they're not expensive condenser mics. They're just good quality condenser mics. Um, and then I have them hooked up to my Scarlett, which is my interface that just goes right into my computer. Um,
There it is.
oh, there she is. I tried to convince my wife to let me buy two, Neumann U85s or U87s, but she said no. And so, I mean, whatever.
Yeah, geez.
So I got these ones instead.
Yeah. That
No,
would
but
be like what, like $6,000 maybe or more.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it, I remember seeing like when I was younger. I remember reading that Gary Burton, that's the mics that he uses to record, and so I remember just think like every studio I go to, do you have the Neumann U85s, please? I would like you to use those on the vibraphone, and they're like, huh? No. Like, thank you for speaking to me anyway. I appreciate
Yes, that's right. No, go back to your instrument, please.
it. Yeah, so I have two of the AT2030 set up, and then I have the like I said the Scarlett, the two inputs, so they both run through that, and then into Logic, and whenever I record vibes, I always pan it, so that it would, at least this is how it this is how it should be coming out. It should You should be listening to it as if you were looking at it. So like if I was
Yeah,
watching a vibraphone player, the low end is going to be on the right side and the high end is going to be on the left side. So it should look that way. So I think I actually last time I moved my mics around, I think I flipped it. I plugged them into the different channels whenever I plugged them back in. So I actually, thanks for reminding me. I should probably go and look into that because I mean otherwise it's just going to be backwards. And so it's like you're sitting like on my side of the vibes instead. So it's not the end of the world, but
yeah.
I do like, especially in like solo or acoustic playing, having that pan because I think it really does give it that sort of depth and uh, vision, I guess. Um,
You want the listener to feel like they're in the space with you, essentially,
yeah,
right? I mean, at least when I'm recording something, that's what I'm trying to do as well. Or you're trying to create that same sort of atmosphere, and maybe not every kind of music is like that, but if you're recording or trying to record um, like real instruments, that's usually the method I take as well.
right. Yeah, so that's basically the setup, and then obviously I have a really really great instrument, and I have really great mallets, and the instrument is it's a One Vibe made by Marimba One. They are my sponsor. I endorse their instruments, and then the mallets are Blue House. Blue House Mallet Shop is a absolutely phenomenal maker of mallets. They make custom mallets for everybody. It's amazing. You just go to their website. You can kind of go through their mallet builder and kind of build a mallet to suit your sound. And I've been with them for a few years now. And the owner, his name is Brad, really great guy to work with. So I've been lucky to be set up with them. And I love my mallets. It's funny because the ones that I've been using since the pandemic started are ones that I bought initially, or that I got from him initially because they were really really soft, and they would never work in a live situation because there's just not enough cut. And so any gig that I ever played, I had to use much harder mallets. But what I realized is, if I'm just recording at home, I can have this sort of dark full sound with these mallets because I'm not cutting through anything. Like I'm just sitting on a vibraphone. Like there's no one else is playing except me, and I can just turn down the volume of the monitor if I want it to be less loud, like, and so it's been fun to use those. I probably get more because I record solo vibe videos and post them online, and there's like I'm in a couple of vibraphone groups on Facebook, and I get so many comments of people asking me like, wow, what mallets are you using? And then when I tell them actually how soft they are, they're like, whoa, I never would have thought. I'm like, I didn't either, but these sound friggin' amazing. So go get some.
Right on. So, so as we get to the end of the song, and you're playing the softest mallets ever created, we're brought back basically to the beginning of the song, and you use the same sort of melody to sort of bring us back. You know what I mean? Create like a bookend, if you will.
Yep.
But then, and this always kind of makes me laugh a little bit at the end of your song, because like the song is so flowy all the way along, and then it just stops. Like it just stops, and I don't know. In a way, I don't mean to be like offensive or anything, but like it kind of makes me chuckle a little bit. Like, how come you ended the song so abruptly? Just
that's how the drums end, bro.
I love it.
I mean, that's how it didn't seem like, again, I didn't like, it would be weird to add on more melody after the drums stopped. It just didn't seem like it would make sense. And I hadn't thought about, again, like you said before, like the ability that I can actually kind of, like I could have kind of cut and pasted or like changed an ending drum beat a little bit. I didn't even think that was an option. So it just ended up being like, that's how the drums end in the song. I'm going to have to end the song that way. And so they just end with the drums.
Just so utilitarian.
I mean, that's what Ron Swanson would do, so that's what I would do.
That's very true. Duke Silver, if only you had his saxophone services.
Duke Silver. I tried to get him for the recording, but he was booked up already. It's a shame.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for doing a song and being a part of the project. Would you do another one?
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm better set up for it. So, and now that I know you can actually change the beat, like, game changer right there. Give better instructions next time.
Yes, okay. I'll do my best. Anyways, Dan McCarthy, thank you so much for being a part of this, and we'll talk to you soon.
I would love it. Thank you, sir.
Cheers.